I am Brad Keelor. He is Adrian Rodriguez-Marek. Next up on Director's Cut, he gives us a culinary tour of Bolivia. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every single week, I sit down with a different GI member who has stories to tell about themselves. Some of them are personal, some are professional, but all of them are fun. You will, if you are eagle-eyed viewers, and I think you are, notice that this is the first show of 2023 where we have an actual guest. And that is very exciting, and we will get to that in just a moment. For now, I must remind you of a few things. After you are done watching this today, if you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, you should head over to geo-institute.org. While you are there, you will read that we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. If you like what you see today, and I hope you do. I hope there's no one out there who contacts me and says they do not like Director's Cut. Hasn't happened yet. You should click like, subscribe, get notifications, and we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. So, now on to our guest who is coming to us. This is, I believe, the second time we've had a guest on who's in the Southern Hemisphere, coming to us all the way from Bolivia, where he is on a break right now, from Virginia Tech. I always want to do the full title. I guess it's Virginia State Polytechnic University, Virginia Tech, where he is a faculty member. It's Adrian Rodriguez-Marek. Adrian, welcome.
Thank you, Brad. It's an honor.
Sometime I really am going to get the full name of Virginia Tech correct. Despite being a Virginian, I can never seem to do it.
You almost got it. It's Virginia Polytechnic and State University.
And State University. Whew. We have 10 questions for you, Adrian, the same way that we do for everybody every week, and 2 of them are always the same. And we start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Right. I'm a professor at Virginia Tech, as you said, a geotechnical engineer. And my job is that of a researcher, a consultant, and an educator. And to be honest, I most strongly identify with the latter, in the sense that if I think of what my role is to train the next generation of engineers. And the other things that I do, a researcher, consultant, feed into that, because I hope I'm bringing those lessons that I learned doing consulting or the things that I produce in my research into the classroom. And I do feel most accomplished when I can do that, when I can see in the eyes of the students that they are getting excited about the things that they are learning. So I think of myself as an educator foremost.
That's great. We're going to talk a little bit more about your work at Virginia Tech as we get through the interview here. We have to ask fun questions on Director's Cut too, and I always make sure of that. We're going to start with this. Did you have any stuffed animals as a kid?
As a matter of fact, I did. I'm home right now. I'm in my childhood home. So my mom used to keep those in a closet. But now the house belongs to the grandchildren, and the closet is full of toys that are more interesting to the grandchildren than some old stuffed animals. So those are no longer there. But the one I do remember is when I was really young, I must have been 6 years old, we traveled to Miami to Disney. And I won in one of those things that you have. I don't know if you have SeaWorld of Disney. I won a big stuffed animal. I cannot, mapache. I'm in Bolivia now, the name doesn't come. A raccoon. It was a raccoon. And My mom was so angry because I would carry that everywhere. I mean, we traveled all over southern Florida with my big raccoon on my hand, but that was one stuffed animal that I did have.
I think it's every parent's nightmare when you fly somewhere for vacation that the kid is going to win a giant stuffed animal. I remember when we were at Legoland one year, we actually told the guy working the game to not give the kids the biggest stuffed animal because we were going to have to take it on the plane to go home. And I felt a little guilty about that. But at the same time, the people around us on the plane probably appreciated that gesture.
Yeah, my mom didn't have those reflexes at that time.
We always ask about research of our interview guests or the practice. And I kind of want to ask you about the link between the research that you do and the consulting or the field work. Your specialty is earthquakes, more broadly, natural disasters. What is the link then between the research and the consulting work that you do?
And that's a really nice question. When I started, my research was focused mostly on site response, but and ground motion characterization. And I started doing more and more research on seismic hazard analysis, or probabilistic seismic hazard analysis to be more specific. And when I was doing a sabbatical in France in 2008, I was invited to participate in a consulting job where they were dealing with a large data set and they wanted a better characterization of the uncertainty implicit in ground motion prediction. And when I went to that meeting, it was a consulting meeting. There were so many questions that were unanswered. And I had a light bulb come up inside my head. And I said, I mean, these are things that need to be answered. And so I started working more and more into the quantification of uncertainty in the different processes that are involved in ground motion prediction, whether it's site response or predicting source effects or path effects. And uncertainty, we quantify uncertainty through the standard deviation, and the Greek letter for standard deviation is sigma. So I would talk so much about that that my wife started calling me Mr. Sigma at home, because I would get excited about that. And so that line of research started with consulting, and I started publishing papers on quantification of uncertainty, on doing non-ergodic seismic hazard analysis, and that started a feedback loop, because I would publish these papers, which would mean that I would get invited into other consulting projects where we would be applying ideas that were developed as part of the research and I was doing with colleagues, not by myself, with other colleagues. And that loop also eventually included the classroom, because I was participating in really exciting consulting projects. And I realized that if I use those examples in my classes, students will get really excited, because they will say, oh, I'm talking with somebody who's actually doing this work. It's not just something theoretical, it's something that has application. So I think for me, it was through seismic hazard analysis and participating in big seismic hazard analysis projects. But that feedback loop, when you're able to do research that has applications in practice, and then you're able to bring that experience from practice into the classroom, this is what makes the university experience so interesting, because your students get to learn from researchers that are driving forward the state of the practice. And I think that's really nice.
So as you've gone through this line of work, it can be pretty interdisciplinary. You end up working with a lot of social scientists, the geography community, and you can go on and on and on. Which community have you worked with that you've been the most impressed by? It can be a discipline, it can be a sub-discipline within that. People who you were just really impressed that they got it. They understood what your role was, in hazard response or mitigation, and you felt like it was really complementary to what either you or geotech or civil in general were doing. I don't know if I worded that well.
No, it's. I mean, I can answer the question in many different ways. I think One is that it's amazing how much you can learn from different communities. When you work with scientists, seismologists, for example, they have a completely different view of the problem. Engineers, we tend to think which is the shortest path to an answer. Whereas seismologists, they tend to think more in terms of which are the most interesting questions we can ask about this problem. And of course, if you only keep asking questions and you don't seek for a solution, you never get anywhere. But that marriage then between the scientist and the engineer makes things very interesting, because they ask the interesting questions, and through the questions you realize what the real problems are. But then at some point you have to put on your engineer's hat and drive towards an answer. In terms of which, I think the people that really are able to put things together is the community of people that are today doing work on resilience research. And that community is not necessarily very large right now, and doesn't involve that many geotechnical engineers, but I think they do understand well the importance of quantifying a natural phenomena in terms of in probabilistic terms, because of the uncertainties that are inherent in the process, but more importantly, in how the response of anything that you care about, whether it is a response to disasters or how a dam behaves in an earthquake, is really a systems problem. It's not just how one effect is going to lead to a response, but how a series of effects can impact the behavior of a system.
And that ultimately a lot of these things are, this sounds kind of like a negative term, but like a people problem or a people issue. I think when I had Sissy Nicolau on last fall, we talked about that, how ultimately a lot of these questions come down to the people who are involved, whether it's the community members who are affected or the people on the other side doing the work. So that was really good. You mentioned students a little earlier, and I wanted to throw this question in here. I came from a small graduate program. We didn't really even have TAs. I can only remember one. And so the professors were doing all the grading themselves. And I just remember thinking, as someone who didn't go into academia myself, it would be horrible to grade a lot of exams, I think. But it must also be rewarding sometimes and surprising. So what is, for you, the most surprising answer you've ever seen on an exam?
I think the most surprising answer, I remember one time I was writing an exam. It was my earthquake engineering class, and I wanted to have a good question. So I like to think of that my exams are not constrained by time. So I don't like to ask tons of questions, but just a few questions that are comprehensive, or that the students need a comprehensive knowledge of the material to answer. So in this particular case, I thought up of what I thought was a really good question, that they needed to bring different elements from the course in order to answer the question properly. And I didn't add that much to the exam, so that question was pretty much the exam. And one student made a very reasonable, simplifying assumption that led to the answer being just a couple of words, and that's it. He completely stumped me, because I had to give him full credit. Because that was a very clever answer. But I think that would be the most surprising answer I've seen.
Have you ever had, and there's a specific case that comes to my mind here. I had a roommate who we were in a class together. We got our final exam, and he discovered he didn't know any of the material that was included in the final exam. He wrote his own exam, wrote out alternate questions and answered those and turned it in and got an 85. My mind was blown. Have you ever had anybody do anything like that?
I think that was very clever, but no, I have not seen that. I've seen it on the bad side. I mean, I recently asked a question about ground motions on the hanging wall, and I had a student give me a full answer about how retaining walls respond to earthquake motions. I wasn't thrilled because the answer wasn't right, and because the student didn't even understand the question. But No, I've never had. I think your friend was very clever.
And I was a little bit jealous because I thought I could have just studied one set of things and gone with that. And instead, here I was sweating it out.
I don't think he would have gotten an 85 with a lot of colleagues that I know in academia. So your friend
I
was
agree.
your friend was both clever and lucky.
And lucky. So you've mentioned that you're in Bolivia right now. When we were trying to figure out a time to record this, you mentioned that you were going to the E02 salt flats, which we're going to put a link to information about that down in the show notes below where you're watching this video right now, viewers. Describe the E02 salt flats. You can't tell me that you're going there and then not talk about it in the interview.
I am from Bolivia, and that's where I am right now. And I've been living in the US for over 30 years. Anytime you meet somebody who has visited Bolivia, they talk about the Uyuni salt flats. And especially Europeans. I mean, it's on their bucket list. It's on many people's bucket list to go to Uyuni salt flats, and I have never been there. So it's pretty embarrassing. Here I'm approaching 50. I'm Bolivian. I travel to Bolivia every year, and I've never been to a place that the entire world seems to know about. So that's why we are going there this year. And the Uyuni salt flats, it's a salt lake that is at an altitude of nearly 4,000 meters. So the Andes split when they go into Bolivia. There's two sides of the Cordillera, and in between is the Altiplano, the highlands. And there is the salt flats. It's essentially a lake. It's 10,000 square kilometers of pure salt. So right now, during the rainy season, there is a thin layer of water on top of the salt, and the effect of the white salt and the water creates a mirror effect. And if you Google Uyuni salt flats, you will see that mirror effect in an area that's practically a desert, a flat desert, makes for amazing photography. So you would see photos with these visual effects that are pretty amazing. But overall, the whole landscape there, and we are doing this before I go, so this is a bit ahead. If we did this 5 days later, I would have better stories to tell you. But the whole region is pretty spectacular because you are at high altitude. The geology, this is a geologist's dream. You are in the Andes. There's not that much vegetation because of the altitude. And so you have these lakes in addition to the salt flats. You have these geological formations that I hear are amazing, and I will be able to confirm it later on. The only downside is that we come here on the summer, on the southern hemisphere summer, and now we are going to 4,000 meters of altitude, so we'll be freezing instead of enjoying the nice warm summer. But we will leave.
So I know you haven't been there yet, but I assume you're preparing for this. With the thin layer of water over it, it's obviously, like you said, a mirror. It's incredibly reflective. Do you have to sunscreen every inch of your body to prepare for this? Because the glare, the sun's rays have to be really intense.
Yes. I mean, that's the first thing they tell you, that you have to bathe yourself in sunscreen. You have to have really good sunglasses. And you need to be prepared for the sun. I don't know how high have you ever been, Brad? I don't know what altitude. What's the highest have you ever been?
Probably 8,500, 9,000 feet. So not that high.
So we go through Potosi, the city of Potosi. You will have to help me do the conversion, but it's 4,600 meters high. So it's about
14,000. Yeah, that's
14,000. So when you're there, it's pretty strange feeling because when you're in the sun, it burns.
Yeah.
It feels hot. And you cross the street to the shady side and you freeze. Literally, they always say that in this altitude, you have these two seasons on different sides of the street. So when you're in the salt flats, I hear from people that tell me that you have to have shorts, a t-shirt, and be ready to freeze yourself at night, because at night it gets extremely cold. So
Well,
That's part of the preparation.
I'm glad you're finally getting to go. I think my equivalent is probably the Washington Monument. I've lived here since 1993. The first time I went to the top was in August of this year. My kids wanted to go. So now I've experienced it. Not as amazing as the Salt Flats, I'm sure, but it was all right. Some good pictures. And it's an ASCE landmark, so that's important.
Yeah, see, there you go. You have to go there.
So the other question that we ask everybody when they come on Director's Cut is, how did you first get involved in ASCE and GI?
Yeah. So ASCE, I got involved as a student, but I have to be honest with you. When I came as a student, as an immigrant, I was coming here to study, and I was in ASCE because people told me I have to be there, and I wasn't very much involved as a student. That's the opposite of what I tell my students. I always tell my students that they have to be heavily involved. And then when I started as a faculty member at Washington State University, my colleague, the late Professor Mohuntan, he insisted, the first thing he told me is join technical committees. That's what I did. And I joined the Soil Dynamics and Earth Engineering Committee and the Risk Assessment Committee. And I was pretty active, you know that, Brad, because we organized together the GSD conference, which was, I thought was a pretty nice conference. As a faculty member, I even got involved in the concrete canoe. And I was the advisor for the concrete canoe. I have to tell you, that year, we beat UW in the concrete canoe. And we made a bet with Pedro Arduino from University of Washington for a barbecue for whomever wins that. So here, everybody will know now that Pedro owes me a barbecue. He still hasn't paid up.
Wait, and what year was this?
I have to go back, but that must have been 2006.
That's a really long time ago. I'm looking at the camera now because Pedro, come on, man, 16 years.
Yeah, the question of the year is actually very relevant because Pedro argues that they won. However, that's very factual. You know, we will go back to the records and we will discern who owns who a barbecue. You know, and now it's public, so Pedro will have to pay up.
This is the magic of Director's Cut. I try to come up with new questions every week, and I was thinking about skiing when I wrote these questions. I'm from Michigan. A lot of people ski there. I never went skiing. There's mountains about an hour west of where I am now. Never been skiing. Doesn't look particularly interesting to me. If I die without ever going skiing, I'm okay with that. What leisure or recreational activity looks the least enjoyable to you, and why?
That's a hard question. You know, I could say, I'm not going to say because I know lots of people are going to jump on me, but I could say fishing. But the truth is that I've never really done it. So I cannot say that I would not enjoy it. Maybe I start fishing and I would love it. No, it's not true. I went shark fishing with Brady Cox once. That's the only time I have ever gone fishing. So maybe I could claim that the first fish I ever caught was a shark, or the only fish I ever caught was a shark. But so I'm not going to say that. You know what? One thing I would say, my wife is from Spain, and in Spain, going to the beach in August is like a religion. You know, everybody does it. If you go to Madrid in August, it's a deserted city. Nobody's there. Everything is closed because everybody goes to the beach. And they go to the beach and they lie on the beach for hours just taking the sun. I cannot handle that. That's a leisurely activity that's not enjoyable to me. I can last 15 minutes and then I need to do something, run, move, cycle. But lying in the sun on a beach for hours on end, not for me.
I'm actually with you on that one. I take the football. We'll have frisbees. We take the soccer ball. Basically anything that you can get us moving around.
Right.
My son can sit in the tent on the beach for 8 hours, and I don't get it. So I'm with you on that. He's not even in the sun, so it's kind of amazing to me. But that's teenagers, I guess. So you, in your courses taught list, you've got one on natural disaster mitigation. The curious mind here that I have, we talked a little bit about how interdisciplinary this stuff is earlier on. What could a non-engineer take away from your natural disaster mitigation course?
And I think if there's one thing I would say is systems behavior, that everything is interconnected, that each component needs to work well, but the components must fit within the system. And if you think about one sad case is the Fukushima disaster, you know, where the seismic response of the nuclear power plant was actually good. No? I mean, everything behaved as expected. No, what wasn't planned is that the secondary system ended up failing because of the tsunami or the flooding due to the tsunami. And that's what led to the problems with the nuclear power plant. So you always have to think about how things behave together as a system. And how different factors can play a role. Human error, for example. I mean, you can do the best design, but you have to account for human behavior. When we talk about, in fact, I will turn the question around, Brad. What I try to do in my course is try to teach engineers what they can learn from non-engineers. No? Because one of the things that's really important when you look at system response, or in particular at resilience, is how community response or how societal response is important for recovery. A community will be resilient not just because the infrastructure is designed in a way that will minimize damages, but the community will be resilient if the community has systems within the community that enable it to respond to the disaster in a way that facilitates recovery. And those are lessons that we can learn actually from people that are doing social science research. So I do bring in my engineering class, I have about 3 or 4 lectures that are given by colleagues from the social science department. I think that's important for engineers to learn that.
So for the engineering students, then, when you bring in those lecturers, I mean, I guess it's probably different every semester, but what do you feel like the reaction is to that? Are we at a point in 2023 where most people in a graduate engineering programs can sit there and say to themselves, I need to hear from these people. I need to understand what they're telling me?
Yeah, I was reluctant when I started teaching this course to do that, but the response has been general. I will not say uniformly, but generally very positive. And when I do a survey at the end of the course, most people will tell me that they love the social science lectures. And I think it's for 2 reasons. I mean, it's partly because of who is teaching it. If you have a good person that's teaching it, they will love it, even if they're talking about something that's not the most interesting. But it's also because it's not something they're used to seeing. So students are seeing something different, and it forces them to think in different ways. And it applies to so many different things. I mean, when you look at flooding along the Mississippi and how do you make decisions for flood prevention, and how no matter what decision you make affects different communities in different ways. You cannot dissociate the engineering decision from the social implications, and you cannot dissociate how the permanence of those solutions with the societal response to these solutions. And when you put the problem to students in these terms, they find it really interesting. And the hope is that then when they go and practice, they will remember this, and they will remember that what we do as engineers has this impact on society. So you cannot separate this aspect, the societal response, from the design that you are doing.
Well, that's great, and that's really encouraging to hear that they do love that so much. We have 2 questions left. Usually I try not to put the biggies at the end, but this time I feel like, we've ramped up, and we're going to end with 2 great ones. We teased this at the beginning of the episode. I live in Northern Virginia. We have a pretty large Bolivian population, and especially like right around where I live in the neighborhood, we love Bolivian food, especially salteñas. What should everyone know about Bolivian food beyond salteñas? But you're going to have to explain salteñas too, I think, to a lot of people.
First of all, Yeah, I'm happy to know that you are educated about salteñas, Brad, because salteñas is the quintessential Bolivian food. And yes, we can fill a whole hour talking about that. Um, it's starting with the name itself, salteñas. Salteñas means somebody that comes from Salta, and Salta is actually a city in northern Argentina. So why is a Bolivian food has the name of an Argentinian city? And the story goes, true or not, I don't know, but that story goes that the first people that started making salteñas, they were from a group of immigrants from Argentina to Bolivia that came here because of political persecution early in the 1800s, when both countries were really coming out into independence. And there were these two ladies who started making empanadas, but these ladies were from Salta, so they would call these empanadas salteñas because they were made by people from Salta, and they became really popular. Salteñas are these meat pies with a dough that's pretty special. It's kind of a dough, a crusty dough. If you like salteñas, it will be because you like the dough. And Brad, you will tell me if I'm wrong or not on that. But
No, I mean I'm a dough guy, I'd say. But so egg or no egg?
ah, that's a very good question. When I was a kid, salteñas always had egg and they had an olive. And
Oh
you have
yeah.
to be careful because if you bite into the the olive, you can break your tooth. But always had egg but now they don't. And so you have to search for the right place where they make salteñas in the old-fashioned way that they will have the egg and the dough. But they're still good. I will tell you a story that I come from an immigrant community in Bolivia myself, because my grandparents on my mother's side, they both came from Europe during the Second World War. So at that time, there was the family, when they were escaping the war, Jewish family, there were about 6 families that came together, all my great-grandmother's family. And after a few years in Bolivia, they all spread out all over the world, literally all over the world. But Bolivia remained a site of pilgrimage where their children will come. So I remember in my childhood, we will always have people that came to visit my grandma from all over the world. Some people liked the food, some people didn't like the food. Everybody liked salteñas. That was universal. Everybody likes salteñas. So if you haven't tried it, you should try it. But you asked me beyond salteñas.
Yeah.
In Bolivia, most of the population lives in the highlands, and the highlands don't have. It's a harsh weather, so there's not that much diversity in spices and other things. So Bolivian food is relatively simple, but very varied. Because if you go to the highlands, where I'm going tomorrow, in fact, you have one type of food. If you go down to the lowlands, it's a completely different type of food, more like Brazilian type food in the lowlands. But speaking of something interesting, in Potosi, which is the gateway to the Uyuni salt flats, it's at about, we just mentioned it, 4,600 meters over sea level. The food, the soup in particular, gets cold very quickly. So they found a very ingenious way of keeping the soup hot, which is they take a stone out of the embers and they put a stone inside the soup, and they serve you the soup with the stone inside, which serves 2 purposes. It keeps it hot. Now, this is very thick soup, but it also brings a little bit of ashes, and it gives a particular flavor. And this is called calapurca, which literally means stone soup. So tomorrow, Brad, I'm going to be having stone soup, and I will be thinking about you because you asked me this question now.
I sometimes feel bad because I feel like Director's Cut, at its heart, is about food, sports, and music. And then there's just some other stuff thrown in. But come on, after an answer like that, we have to talk about, this is why we talk about food so much on Director's Cut. That is fantastic. So the next time anybody's in Northern Virginia and want to get some Bolivian food, I'll help you out.
Yeah, you should. Here in my city, the best food is the food you eat in the streets. My kids were born in the US. They are now 18 years old. And when they come here, they know the places they want to go. there is something that's called pastelitos. It's like I don't know, like it's a dough with cheese inside, and it's really good. But I've never, I mean, I've lived here for a long time. I come here every year. Never had good pastelitos in anybody's home. You have to go to a street vendor. That's where they're really good. And if you want to have the most popular food in my city, it's called ASCE. You have to go to a street market, because that's the only place where they will make it, where it will be really good. So it's street food is what makes. I think street food is what defines Bolivian food.
So we had one more thing. You were drinking mate from a gourd with a metal straw. I spotted the straw when we were talking before the interview, and you were just doing this because you are enjoying a mate on a Wednesday afternoon as we are talking. Can you tell everybody a little bit about mate?
That's right. This is not a problem. I mean, I drink mate all the time. You can ask my students, if you ever have Ashley Cavas in the director's cut, ask her about my mate, because every time anybody comes to my office, they will find me drinking mate. Mate comes from a shrub. It's a loose leaf tea, and you drink it in a gourd. I mean, exactly like this with a metal straw. So you put the mate inside. You pour. In fact, that's what I need to do. You pour some water in it, and you can keep drinking. And the essence of mate, Brad, is actually the communal aspect of it. And this is COVID, despite COVID, I would say not yesterday, 2 days ago, I had a barbecue with my friends. And before the barbecue, while we are waiting for the meat, just somebody prepares a gourd like this. And the tradition is always the same. You pour it, you drink it, and then you pour it for somebody else, you pass it to the next person. So it's the same gourd that's going from person to person, which may seem odd to most people, but it's not odd to South Americans that do this. And mate is, most people associate it with Argentina or Uruguay. It's actually from the Chaco region. So it's a region that's shared between Argentina, particularly northern Argentina, Uruguay, or all the way down to Buenos Aires, Uruguay, Paraguay, and southern Brazil, and the southern tip of Bolivia. That's where I'm from.
That is fantastic. I feel like we really could talk for an hour about this. And when, I don't want to nag him again, but when Matt Evans finally agrees to do that GI cooking show, we could have you on as a guest and talk about Bolivian food. So Matt, if you are watching, I have not let that fall out of my head. We have one final question, and this is a biggie too. I like to ask these philosophical questions at the end of Director's Cut. If you were starting a brand new university from scratch, zero, and you had unlimited resources, we're just going to call it that, what would be your top priorities? What would you do first?
Wow. That's a hard question, Brad. I think I come up with different answers, because on one hand, I think that the university must serve a function within a community. I mean, whether it is a state or a region, or some may be meant to serve a larger group, like the whole country, but they must serve a function within a community. If you allow me to just talk a little bit about Virginia Tech, I think that our program in geotechnical engineering plays a particular role in that respect, because we have a very strong focus on professional preparation for our master's program. In fact, a strong element within Virginia Tech is the Center for Geotechnical Practice and Research, within the geotechnical group, where we have a bunch of companies. Many members have been here in Director's Cut, and that this academia industry group serves and puts in contact our students with what is their practice work, but also serves us to maintain that link so that our education is focused on serving that community, serving the geotechnical community by training people that are ready to go out and work with them. But that's not my only answer. That it's actually my problem, because I also think that a university must serve to educate society and create free thinkers. And by free thinkers, I mean people with an open mind. And the truth is that with limited resources, the two things can be a little bit contradictory, because it's one thing to give somebody the tools to do a particular job. I want somebody to be able to design foundations the way that it's going to provide the best service to the client, or do it done in a way that's going to be the safest for a community. And in order to do that, you need a lot of technical knowledge. But in order to create free thinkers, you need to provide a liberal education. And finding that equilibrium is really not that easy. I think U.S. universities, in a large sense, they fit that mold. But even as I speak, I realize that I don't know where that equilibrium is. When I love for students to take classes in the liberal arts, I want engineers to be well-read, to have the tools to enter a debate on societal issues with knowledge that goes beyond just paraphrasing whatever they heard on the media or they read on the internet. However, I also want my students to have taken stats and physics too, and thermodynamics. And often, because we have to graduate students in 4 years, when we add courses on the liberal arts side, we are dropping courses on this field. And I complain about having students that haven't taken stats or haven't taken physics too, yet I also want students to take courses on the liberal arts. So you asked me a question that puts me in a bind, because I don't know exactly how you find this equilibrium. But if you see, your question was, what would be my top priority? I think my top priority would be to find that balance. To find that balance where we are educating students that are ready to go out and work and be productive members of society, yet that they also have the ability to to be good citizens. By good citizens, I mean being educated citizens, and today more important than ever, that can have a critical mind when looking at different opinions and contribute to the discussion of where our society is moving forward.
When I wrote that question, I was thinking specifically of Singapore, actually, and the way that their university system just didn't come out of nowhere, because it existed before 2000. But in the first decade of the 2000s, it seemed like every time you turned around, some esteemed colleague from a top university somewhere was going to Singapore and having piles of money thrown at them. And so I thought, well, what if you really did start from scratch? So I knew there wasn't going to be a perfect answer, but I think yours was really good, and it got there. So don't worry about that. Adrian, you made it through all the questions. We didn't even talk for a full hour about the food thing, so I feel like that's a success. It leaves the people wanting more. For the viewers, if you liked what you saw, and you're here at the end, so you probably did, make sure you click like, subscribe, and get notifications so that we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel, which is frequently. So Adrian, thank you for doing this. Thanks for your answers and for doing this from so far away, right before a big trip too.
Thank you, Brad. I really enjoyed this.
And for all of our viewers, we will see you with another brand new Director's Cut next week.
Blockhead.